Hello class, this video is going to be pertaining to question 7 of chapter 6 in the testing your economic quotient section of that chapter. So in this question we are given a few things. We're given these variables up here, and we're given some stuff kind of spread out throughout this table, and we have to then fill in the blanks. So before we go into it, we're just going to identify a couple of these things. First and foremost, your L would be your labor. So that's going to be your input. This Q, we're just going to name this quantity, which is our output. This P of L, that's actually going to be the price of labor. So that's your cost of your input. Then you've got your total fixed cost, total variable cost, total cost, marginal cost, average total cost, average variable cost, and average fixed cost. Now the beautiful thing about this question is it's really forcing you to know the different formulas and how to really use them and apply them. So we're going to kind of go through each one. First and foremost, since it does identify in this question that we are dealing with a perfectly competitive market, which means that we are price takers on both the price of the input and the output. So if we know that the price of the input, we're a price taker, then we know that that price of that input is going to stay the same in our opinion. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm actually going to drag down all of this price of labor, because the price of labor is not going to change. Because we interact in this perfectly competitive market, the price of that input is fixed and it stays the same throughout our model. The total fixed cost, if you remember, a fixed cost are those costs that don't change as output changes or as more or less inputs are used. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to fill in all of these. Because these are our fixed costs, we know that they don't change, so we can just go ahead and fill in those two parts. So that covers these first two aspects of what I wanted to cover. And what this is this is a little checklist for me saying I need to go about it in this way, because we're given so limited amount of information. We really have to kind of piecemeal this together and go about this in a certain order. You can go about it in a different order, but this is the order that I chose to do. The next one that I'm going to take care of real quick, because it's a relatively easy one, is because we are given total fixed cost and total variable cost, we can calculate this total variable cost in E5. So if you remember, total cost is equal to total fixed cost plus total variable cost. So if we have this total cost and then total fixed cost, we can rearrange this formula to say that total cost minus total fixed cost equals total variable cost. So if we know that, if we can rearrange that, then we can actually take your total cost minus your total fixed cost to come up with that total variable cost of $40. So that's how you would calculate that particular cell, or a way to calculate that particular cell. So we're now done with E5. Next, I'm going to try and tackle this E2 up here. Now, we are in the key component that we are going to use. Sorry, we're not, is this marginal cost. Sorry, let me back up. We're not going to use that marginal cost just yet, but we're going to calculate this total variable cost. So we are actually given the amount of labor times the price of labor. So if you remember, that total variable cost is also equal to the price per input times the quantity of input. So we know that we're using 2 units of labor. The price is $5 per unit. So we can actually calculate that, where we say labor times the price per labor gives us our total variable cost at that point. Now let's go ahead and calculate total cost on this same point, or at this same line. Well, we know total cost is total fixed cost plus total variable cost, so we can say equals total cost plus total variable, or total fixed cost plus total variable cost. And we now know we now know, sorry, let me get that done real quick. And I'm going to mark off those two as we keep going down. So now we now know what that is. Now the next thing that we need to calculate is this total cost right here. This is where we're going to use this marginal cost aspect. So if you remember, marginal cost is equal to the change in total cost divided by change in output. So we know what the change in output is, and we know what that marginal cost is. We know what our original total cost is. So now we just need to basically calculate what that other total cost is. So the way that we're going to go about doing this is we're going to start rearranging this. So first and foremost, we're going to take the marginal cost times the change in output, then gives us the change in total costs. So let's go ahead and start doing that equation. So we're going to say that marginal cost times the change in output, so 65 minus this 40. And then we now have to calculate the change in input. So if you remember, the change in input would be this new total cost minus the old total cost. So we're going to simply add in this original total cost to calculate our new total cost. So we see that our new total cost is actually 130. And the way that we did that is we took the change in quantity times the marginal cost and then added this original total cost. And what we did is we basically just reverse engineered this marginal cost curve, or this marginal cost equation. Now, just like down here, we now know what our total cost is and our total variable or fixed cost. We can calculate our total fixed cost, our variable cost, by taking our total cost minus our total fixed cost. So now we see that this total variable cost is 20. So I'm going to go ahead and mark off a couple more of these as we are now done with those. So now let's go ahead and see if we can calculate this last total variable cost. And the way that we're going to do that is we now know what the average variable cost is and the quantity. So if we go about doing this, we can say that average variable cost is equal to total variable cost divided by output. So what we're going to do is we're just going to rearrange this, and we're going to say that average variable cost times output will equal this total variable cost. Well, if we have that equation, then we know that we have the average variable cost and the output. So we're going to simply say the average variable cost times the output gives us our total variable cost. Then we can now calculate our total fixed cost. And our total fixed cost is total variable cost plus total fixed cost. So now we've got this whole section done. So I'm going to go ahead and mark those off. Next, we're going to calculate if we have all of these total costs, or if we have these total costs and our change in output, we can now calculate these marginal costs. Remember, marginal cost is change in total cost divided by change in output. Here we're going to have a change in total cost of 140 minus 130 divided by the change in our output, and we go from 85 to 65. And we can drag that down. Now we have our marginal costs. Now we're going to calculate this average total cost. Well, average total cost, if you remember, is equal to total cost divided by output. So now we can say our total cost is equal to this amount divided by our output. We can simply drag that value down. So that's going to take care of that one and that one. Now we need to calculate our average variable cost. And we already have our formula down here. Average variable cost equals total variable cost divided by output. And we can go ahead and do that same formula here. And I'm going to place that last formula right there, and that's going to be the total variable cost divided by the output. We can do the same thing for the average fixed cost. Average fixed cost is simply equal to total fixed cost divided by output. Again, we can do our total fixed cost divided by our output, and I'm going to drag that down, and we now have our total fixed cost. Another way that you could calculate total fixed cost, if you want, or average fixed cost, average fixed cost is also equal to average total cost minus average variable cost. So you could have, instead of doing it the way that I did, you could have said equals average total cost minus average variable cost, and we're going to get the exact same answers. So it doesn't matter which way you do it. So now we've got everything filled in, with the exception of one column, and this is the amount of labor that we use. So there's a couple ways to go about doing this, and one of the easiest ways that I've found is I'm going to take, and we know that this total variable cost is the dollar per input times the quantity of output. Well, we have all of our total variable cost. We know what the price of labor is. So we're going to simply reverse engineer this total variable cost equation, and we're going to say total variable cost divided by the price will equal the quantity. So I'm just going to take this particular equation and rearrange it to equal that. So if we do that, we can say that equals to total variable cost divided by the price. We can drag that down, and we now have the equation for all of our, we now know what our labor is. So that part right there will fill in this whole table. And hopefully this video explains everything and explains how to go about looking at these formulas and kind of manipulating and using these formulas to find answers whenever there is only a select set of numbers that are given to you. I hope this helps. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask me about this particular video.